Budget and Finance Committee to order. We have a quorum. Mr. Weezer, Mr. Smith, Mr. Rosendahl is out today. Mr. Koretz, myself, Bernard Parks is chair. So we have a quorum. Mr. Cardenas is here with ITGA, and he can go through his role.
Yes, Information Technology and Government Affairs will now come to order, and we'll meet as a minority. We do not have a quorum, as it's a three-member committee, and the chairman, myself, Tony Cardenas, is present. Jan Perry and Dennis Stein are not present at this moment. Thank you.
What I'd like to do is, before we get into the agenda, is we have one public comment, but we could go with item 1, which is a joint item for both committees, and then we'll go into closed session and deal with items 2 through 5, and so that we can take care of the joint items initially, and then get back to the Budget and Finance Committee. So for public comment, we have Dr. Clyde Williams.
For the public comment, Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. Maybe we should have a fees sheriff. Finance Department wants a collections sheriff. I would highly recommend an Inspector General for DPW, as I have proposed for DWP. Public Works represents about 70% of my DWP bill. That is the solid waste and the sewerage fees that are added on to poor old DWP. 60% more than power and water put together. Interesting. There's also the fire department. They have a brush clearance fee, which is going to increase, but it's still so small that people will just pay it without even receiving an invoice. So that is some people, because some people apparently haven't cleared their brush for many years, but they aren't penalized. Other people are. Seems unequitable. So we're looking also for a stormwater fee. Well, the county may have taken it away from the Board of Public Works because the county is supporting a state bill so that they can impose the fee to the property tax roll and then pass it along, split it with the LA City, thereby avoiding a direct vote of the voters of LA City. So I think we need a fees sheriff, especially with the election coming up, emphasizing our fees, taxes, our taxes, fees, we don't know. So I'd highly recommend exploring an Inspector General for the Department of Public Works, the Fire Department, in regarding the fees that they impose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I failed to mention, if we could move item 8 on the Budget and Finance on consent, so that we don't hold staff up unnecessarily. We have a motion to move item 8 on consent. Anybody have any concern? We'll move that item on consent. Now we'll go to item 1, and Mr. Cardenas, you can take the lead on that.
Okay.
Okay, I believe
Item 1.
item 1 is communication from the Financial Management System Project Oversight Committee, which consists of the Mayor, Controller, ITA, CAO, and CLA, and Department of General Services, relative to a request to transfer funds and execute contract amendments for the Supply Management System FMS integration.
We now just want to announce we now have a quorum of the IT committee, as Councilmember Perry is now present. Okay. Please proceed.
Hi, Randy Levin, General Manager, Chief Technology Officer for Information Technology Agency. You have before you a report from what we're calling the Project Oversight Committee for the Financial Management System project. And we have our team here of CAO, Controller, ITA, GSD, as well as in the audience, the Mayor's Office. And we've been partnering also with the CAO and the CLA. And this request is for additional funding. There's the CLA. This request is for the additional funding for the SMS system, which is our procurement system, where we do procurement and accounts payable for commodity purchases for approximately $1.72 million. Okay.
Okay. Now, can you please outline for us what brings about this request, and then how long will this play out?
This area is a significant system for us. It's PeopleSoft, and over the past couple of years, we have lost a lot of resources on the side of GSD and ITA, as well as in the Controller's Office, who's the recipient of this information back and forth between the FMIS system, the financial system, and SMS. Because of the SMS project, the FMS project, we need to rename these, this is too close. Because of the FMS project, we need to make significant changes to the SMS system, the procurement system. And because of all of the various resource constraints and the amount of staff that we've lost, a lot of this work we cannot do right now, and it's very problematic because this is probably the most key system interface that we have back and forth between the financial system. This is the system that really tracks all the encumbrances, and which is then produced in the financial reports. And not being able to do this work is extremely problematic. So that's the nature of the request. It breaks down as follows: about $1.5 million to either Metaformers, Oracle, or CGI, whoever has the appropriate resources that we need. It also is for a full-time person for general services, and this was a request they had in the budget. I don't want to speak for you, but this was a request they had in the budget that was denied, but it's a key position that they require in order to manage SMS to FMIS, as well as authority to have dollars in the salary account for the controller, so that the controller can backfill their person we're moving from controller's office to GSD in the critical role of the interface, and that person knows what they're doing, and they're going to backfill with 3 90-day retired personnel. So we're trying to find the appropriate resources that know some of these areas within the city and move them to the most immediate need.
Okay. Now, am I understanding that one of the factors that cause this need is the fact that, say, a year ago, we had different talented individuals with different expertise and understandings in-house, and now that they are no longer here, we can't force them to come back. We are void of certain talents and individuals who can actually do the work that you've identified that needs to be done.
That is correct.
And so therefore, 90-some% of that is going to be done based on this request, based on a third party who will provide us with that expertise to continue to move forward?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, when it comes to reconciling the FMS system with the SMS system, what are the options that we have? Are we tracking down one road now, and it's a pretty black and white now, or do we still have options of perhaps if we do run into problems or what have you, do we have options, or we're pretty much going down one road now and it's got to work?
Well, if we don't automate the interface and have the data correct between SMS and FMS, it will result in two things. One, either it could be a material weakness in our financial statements, and the controller can talk to that, or we could experience a significant manual effort, which will require a lot more work on the departments and potentially adding more staff that way in order to overcome the fact that we couldn't automate this entire area.
But if we find ourselves in that situation and we don't have enough real-time staff, then we run the risk of having mistakes And if we have mistakes, maybe the controller can ask this question, if we have mistakes, what kind of mistakes would occur and what kind of, I guess, problems would result?
Well, it calls to question the integrity of the financials that the controller represents to be accurate and true. And so the possibility of a finding of an inaccurate representation of our financials is an obvious potential bad thing that we do not want to see happen. It's very significant that the SMS system, it's significant from the controller's perspective that our financials are, without question, have integrity, and the SMS is a huge part of this, as it's all the goods and commodities procured for the entire city. So no small task. It's vital that we do take a path to success, so that when we go live next July 2011, the SMS system will be successfully interfacing.
So, for example, is this an accurate statement that if we do not have those financials in order and accurate, that it could in fact even potentially affect our bond ratings? Is that one aspect of what could happen? In other words, we have to do proper reporting. If we don't have proper reporting, then it could be construed that they can't honestly represent our worth, our situation, our financial status.
I should let the CAO answer that, but to the controller's role in that, as you know, we oversee the audit for the city, the citywide single audit, and so we would see it in the form first of a finding in the audit, which then, I presume, Mr. CAO?
Yes, most certainly, as you are suggesting, yes, it certainly could impact as we go back out to the market and sort of try to issue bonds. It certainly could affect our issuance by increasing those debt service costs on those future bond issuance. And if I may, just to sort of to provide the community some more information with some of your questions, I think what we are concerned with is we don't want to have to go back to a dual entry, very manual, intensive process. And in the report, we talk about perhaps additional 60 staffing, and whether it's 60 or 50 or what have you, there are going to be significant additional costs that we will have to address, will have to provide if we're not able to get basically the interfaces, get SMS and FMS in sync. And I know GSD, having gone down through this path, can better sort of explain that, but certainly we don't want to find ourselves in that type of situation. Certainly as we've progressed over the last several years with reduced staffing, through EREP and through other changes, it's not really a good viable option for the city at this point.
I'll turn it over to the chair to ask financial questions, unless you have any other tertiary questions.
Okay. Let me ask, has it always been the plan that the two systems are going to be merged at some time?
There was a plan in place for PeopleSoft to be merged into the CGI system at some point, once we implemented CGI.
Okay, now go back.
Yes, so basically, the phase one of FMS was the core financials. There was a discussion early on of bringing in SMS purchasing in either phase 2 or phase 3.
So we're accelerating it then?
At this point, we are not accelerating. We're starting to have the conversations regarding possible potential replacement SMS.
No, I'm just saying this merger of the two systems, has that always been part of the plan?
What we're talking about here is the interface. Basically the exchange of information.
I got the wrong word then. Was the interface always planned?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not accelerating, it just was part of the plan?
Correct.
Because the reason I ask that is that when we get these incremental, minor, $1 million deals, it just appears that it was a suddenness that all of a sudden we believe we have to do it. There's not a lot of explanation that this has been planned for months or years, that we're just getting to that phase. And I think that would be helpful to explain it, is that it's just not, we woke up one day and said, wow, it doesn't interface, and we better do something about it.
Debbie Ramos, Assistant General Manager from General Services. It is something that's been anticipated. It's actually something that we've been working on with the Controller's Office, with ITA, since the FMS project began. I think the initial thought was that we would be able to use some of our existing resources supplemented with the Metaformers contract, which I think you've already approved a couple of requests in the previous months. But when we're suddenly faced with looking at the complexity of the changes that were required in order to provide the information that FMS was looking for, and coupled that with ERIP, one of our key persons that we lost was a fiscal system specialist. That's the person that does the oversight, looks at the SMS system, looks at the financial system, and is kind of that quality assurance to make sure that the data matches, that it maintains, or it continues to be in sync. We lost that person as part of ERIP. So that was a huge blow to our team. But like I said, the complexity of what was required and the changes that were required in the SMS, I don't think anybody envisioned that we would get to that point where the existing staff could not address it. As we get closer and closer to the timeline and we're looking at what is required of us, that's when we've had to come back and kind of reassess the resources. This isn't something that we could have done early on because the SMS is sort of chasing the FMS. So as changes or as FMS is being configured, then we come back to the SMS and say, okay, this is the direction that we need to go in. What do we need to do to configure it to get them what they need for the
So the interface was always planned. The issue today is that we did not perceive we wouldn't have the internal people.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Or that it would be as complex as it's turning out to be.
All right. The other issue, and I think it would be helpful if we can provide that kind of insight to the clerk so we can have that kind of history. The other thing that would be helpful for me anyway is that we often we incrementally come to the council and say we need funds, but we do not give an overview of the life of the project. I think we've already spent $6 million on SMS, and as we march through that, we're talking about another million. Is there other millions that are forthcoming? Is there a maintenance ongoing? And I'm assuming from reading this that we're moving in the direction of consultants doing the ongoing maintenance and not to hire. Am I reading that correctly?
That would be correct. We don't seem to possess the ability to retain the people that we have trained to be able to really run this system. We don't have any training money, and this is a very complex system. So in order for us to really maintain it and do the things that we need to do to support the city, we're just unable to with the staff that we have today. I mean, all of us.
So I understand. The thing is, I just want to make sure if we're going down that path, that down the road we don't end up with a personnel package that says we're going to now hire the 30 people that left or something.
No.
And council members, one of the recommendations in the report is to take a look at that question of what's next and how are we going to be dealing with SMS down the line. So that's one of the recommendations that's in the report if you adopt it today.
Because I would like to see, as I mentioned with SMS, that this incremental 6 million, 1 point something, what the future, the same thing with FMS, that we've spent millions of dollars. We just added, I think, $600,000 or $700,000 for the account receivable. Now, at some point, I guess we've made the decision that a contractor's going to maintain that one. So we just need to have that kind of a larger scale life of project view of those two. The other thing I was going to ask is that, let's see, I didn't quite understand, maybe the CEO can explain it to me, on the funding. We're giving general services dollars, and we're giving them the controller's position. And it appears that we're giving the controller money to replace it. And I'm trying to figure out if the controller already had it in their budget, where is that money?
With what's being requested through the report is for contractual service, for the controller's office, they are going to loan somebody potentially.
They loan, that position's already paid for?
Yes.
In their budget?
In their budget. Now, what's being requested is they were trying to gather basically a pool of retired folks that potentially come back and assist in this process, and they would like to get some dollars in order to pay those. Basically, we're talking about the 90-day rehires, and so this is what that money is for.
Okay, but the money for the controller, is that specifically for just this purpose? From the reading of it, it appears they're going to be doing other services beyond this particular function.
Thank you. By the way, Claire Bartels, Controller's Office. The person that we, as a team, and have the Controller's support are loaning to GSD has a unique set of skills, and in fact is the only person that we have found that is equipped to help on the SMS project, understands from a city perspective, and has the skills. That person is currently working on the FMS project on citywide systems, inclusive of SMS. We can't live on the FMS project without that individual skill set. So if we loan to GSD, we are asking for 3 consecutive 90-day employees, and we have identified them that have the citywide systems skills that can replace the one individual over the course of the 9-month period that she'll be with the General Services Department.
Okay, but are they going to be working on duties other than these 2 systems, or is it going to be narrowly focused on FMS and SMS?
Our replacement people will be doing, it's all FMS and all the systems that interact and integrate. What are all my I words?
On FMS.
On FMS, but it's, they will be purely assigned to FMS,
Okay.
but their knowledge base requires citywide system knowledge, inclusive of SMS, but not intensely or solely.
Okay, if we're giving the position on loan, then what is the 78,000 for the general services being allocated for?
We would also like to be able to hire a fiscal system specialist, because this is a function that's going to go on beyond just the testing phase. And really, the reason we're needing to ramp up is because of the additional programming and the testing that goes through, in addition to trying to maintain the day-to-day system, because we've pretty much shifted our day-to-day production people over to the testing and preparation for implementation of FMS system. But even though that hopefully will all come to an end July 5th when the system when FMS goes live, we're still going to need somebody that's going to be able to be sort of that watchdog or that quality assurance person that's going to be able to look at both systems. And so we're asking that we can bring somebody on board now so that the controller's office, the person that's going to be loaned over to us, can train that person.
Okay.
So then in the city now we'll have 2 people that know how to do it, as opposed to what we have today is 1 person.
It was just unclear. It just
Right.
appeared that there was money being shuffled, and you couldn't figure out for what purpose. If the controller's giving up a body, then why are we giving you money for a body?
Right,
And it
we
wasn't-
need, we're hoping to not find ourselves in the bind that we're in today, where we've got 1 person and, she knows the interfaces from the controller's aspect, she knows the SMS, but she's only 1 person and we both need her. So we're hoping to be able to train another person so that we can kind of share that resource. And like I said, even though the testing aspect of it is over, the day-to-day production, we need to make sure that the systems stay in sync, and this
And
person.
so you'll budget for that new position for next year?
We will be including it in the GSD budget, yes.
Answer it. Jose? Okay, we'll move that item with those recommendations. But could we get the information so we can get some clarity?
Is that unanimous from both committees? Yeah. Yeah, okay, unanimous.
Some clarity in the written and on the life of the project, so we get a better idea of what we spent, what we intend to spend, and what could be projected. And that way, I think it gives a better clarity. And then that position, I don't, we see the numbers, but it does need to be clarified that we're hiring a position to be trained by the controller's person. So upon them returning in 9 months, you have a position on staff and you'll budget for it.
Okay.
So we need that kind of clarity on it, okay?
Yep.
Also, Chairman Cardenas from the IT Committee, I just wanted to request an article from the LA Times, possibly noting that the City of Los Angeles just doesn't need public safety personnel to run the city. We do have other mission-critical responsibilities outside of just public safety. Just thought I would request that. Not officially to staff, but just out there to the world. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move that item. Before going to closed session, Dr. Weissman, you wanted a public comment, and so we could do that before going to...
Got to give a little plug in front of the Budget Committee. Anybody from the mayor's office here?
Wouldn't do any good.
Thank you.
Okay. They don't come up willing.
Yeah. They hide. Thank you very much. They hide in there.
They all come up with it.
Not to be found.
Is he ready?
Several things. Thank you. First of all,
A little closer to the mic.
extraordinary courtesy. This is very welcome. I'm going to put on a couple hats here. One of them right now is the secretary of last year's budget advocates and a alternate for next year's budget advocacy. We are a group of people who are elected by our peers and working under the aegis and with the cooperation of the mayor's office. When it comes time next year, in the spring, when the new budget comes out, and it, of course, comes to your committee, Mr. Parks, and has to go through each of the departments and so forth, I'm going to ask in public here that you consider having a specific liaison from the budget advocates to be here at this table, because there are many of us who have some specific and important information for you. And if we're going to be recognized as part of the city family, I think this would be something I think can be accomplished in this year. I have another issue, and I'm glad that we have the combined meeting here for the two committees, because my neighborhood council, new hat on my head right now, West Hills Neighborhood Council, was very concerned about a proposal from Mr. Bill Rosendahl to assess a $7 parking fee for each person who parks in this building or in the closely adjacent buildings. I understand this was to go to your committee, Mr. Cardenas, if it hasn't already, and the West Hills Neighborhood Council is quite opposed to that and has a community impact statement in this opposition, for the reason that we have already found it very difficult to get to this city, to come to these meetings, and then on top of that, to be charged for it when we are part of the city's government is a problem. I know other government officials are not charged or are charged as the case may be. But when you're dealing with the public and the constituency that we have, some of them, that's a significant burden, and I want you to consider our opposition to that motion when it comes before your two committees. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Duly noted. We appreciate your input and your reminder of the matters that are going through the process. Being that that item you referred to is not agendized on this committee, I can't specifically comment on that specific item, but just know that it's still in process.
I had understood it was being directed to your committee.
Yes.
Well, all right. You've heard it here, and you'll remember it when it actually comes formally before your committee. Thank you again for the very generous courtesy.
You're going to go in closed session in the back.
Okay, that will take us to item number 6, which is a CLA and City Ethics Commission reports in response to motion Weezer Garcetti Corretz relative to 3 proposed ballot measures allowing for the use of ranked choice voting, vote by mail along with the neighborhood vote centers in city elections, and removing the cap on the maximum allowable amount that can be contained in the Matching Funds Program Trust Fund, and other related technical changes to comply with the recent court cases.
Before we get, just sit still, we have Maya on item 6.
Good afternoon, Maya Zettler, on behalf of VICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. We are here to testify on 2 portions of this item, on the vote by mail component, which VICA supports, and the use of ranked choice voting, which we oppose. We feel that the ranked choice voting, the way it stands now, is a confusing new system, and it would be difficult for the average voter to understand, and therefore we believe it would discourage voters from voting on Election Day, and thus not achieve the stated goal of increasing voter turnout. In terms of the vote by mail proposal before you, we believe that it would continue to offer voters another option, and this would help with the stated goal of voter turnout. We believe that it would help to engage more voters who may have personal or professional obligations that provide difficulty for them to get to the polls on Election Day. In addition, it would help to consolidate the neighborhood voting centers into larger centers, which we feel would be beneficial for the city. So we wanted to be on record to support the vote by mail component and oppose the use of ranked choice voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I wanted to clarify if we're discussing all three items today in committee or just the matching funds component?
I think we have all three items, vote by mail, ranked choice,
Okay.
and then also the
Matching the three items.
because what the issue, I think, for today is that the 27th, this item is going to rules, or it's got to be in council by the 3rd. So we got to move all three today in one fashion or another.
All right, certainly. Charles Mott of the CLA's office. As was stated, the item before you pertains to our report, which is in response to motion Weezer, Garcetti, Corretz. This motion proposes that we look at three different reforms of the city's election system to put on the March 2011 ballot.
Speak right.
Oh, sure, sorry, voice is a bit done. Those three proposed reforms are moving to a vote by mail with neighborhood voting centers election system, eliminating the cap on the city's matching funds program trust fund, and then moving to a ranked choice instant runoff voting. Just to preface this all, these are three policy decisions that are before your committee. What I will do is go ahead and give a brief background on each of them and the fiscal impacts that we've identified on them, and then it's basically up to your committee and the council as a whole to decide which direction to go. Just to go through all three, the first item, which is a vote-by-mail reform, the motion requests that the city move towards the vote-by-mail elections for certain elections in which voters would be mailed out a ballot that would then be returned to the city either through the mail or by being dropped off at a neighborhood voting center. These neighborhood voting centers would be similar to existing polling places. The city clerk has reported to us that this could be feasible for single district special elections which have only one ballot type, but that moving beyond anything more than a single district special election is just impractical and feasible given their current resources. Now, the option for a single district special election with a single ballot type, as I said, is implementable with the current system we have, and that this would have no adverse impact to the general fund or costs, but that this negative impact is depending on how many voting centers were open. So how many places in the neighborhoods could accept ballots would affect the actual financial impact of this. Moving on to the second proposed reform, that is to eliminate the cap on the matching funds program trust fund. The motion proposed that that cap be eliminated. The city charter does currently provide the cities to make annual contributions to this fund of $2 million per year, up to a cap of $8 million total in that fund. Both these amounts are to be adjusted annually by the Consumer Price Index, and at present the city's adjusted contribution is roughly $3 million per year, with the cap at roughly $12 million. Now, the fund is currently funded to that cap. All excess funds that are in the fund do return to the city's general fund. So moving forward with eliminating the cap is a policy decision for council, but it should be noted that without any additional recommendations, just a simple elimination of the cap would require the city to begin making annual payments to the fund of $3 million a year, with those amounts to be increased annually by the Consumer Price Index. The final recommendation in the motion is to move from the city's current election system to a ranked choice or instant runoff voting system. The city clerk has reported that in order to do this, it would need a new voting system, and that the cost of any new voting system, whether it includes ranked choice voting or not, is estimated to cost around $40 million. Now, they do report that at a future date, possibly sooner in the future, they will need to replace their current voting system, so regardless of whether we go forward with ranked choice voting, they will need a new voting system, and that the cost for having that voting system be able to accept ranked choice ballots is roughly 1 to 2% of that $40 million cost. Now, any system that we would adopt would also have to be certified for use by the California Secretary of State, and no system that is currently available for purchase has been fully and unconditionally certified. Both the cities of San Francisco and Oakland are using ranked choice voting, and they are using a system that has been given a provisional certification each year by the California Secretary of State. The county is currently also exploring the acquisition of a new voting system and expects to have their proposal ready by 2012 and an actual system purchased by 2015. And it is possible that the city could work with the county so they could use the same equipment to save some costs. But if the city does move forward with ranked choice voting, there would be costs associated with it because there would be a new system required. And it should be noted that if we do go forward with it, there will have to be a large education and outreach campaign to notify voters of how the new system will work when it will take effect. That's the summary of what's
Let me
before
just
you.
verify so I'm ensure my notes are accurate. This has gone before the Rules Committee, and they took no position on any of the three?
Yes, this went before the Rules Committee on last Wednesday, and they moved it forward with that recommendation.
And then, before we get moved, I didn't call one public comment. Trent, come up, make a comment. And then also, let me ask Maya, your letter, did you purposely not take a position on the cap? Okay.
Hi, Trent Lang, President of the California Clean Money Campaign. I'm here representing a group of good government groups, including the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles, California Common Cause, and the ACLU, who are all very strongly in favor of all three of these reforms. We're a city that has a record low turnout, getting lower and lower every single year. We have to do something to do that when only 7% of voters are deciding runoff elections in many cases. But we believe that all three of these reforms are cost-effective, especially in the long run. On the question of raising the trust fund cap to strengthen the city's current public financing system, which the voters put in place in 1990, it would allow extensions to the cap as time goes on to strengthen the public financing system. But most year, the next year or the year after that, we are at the summary, so you would have some additional funds that wouldn't be going in. But in most years, the city has been allocating the $3 million a year as per the charter. So it will only be in occasional years that this will have an effect, and those will be the years that it's most needed for elections like the upcoming election in 2013, when you have a number of open seat races where you really need the strong public financing system that gives voters confidence. So the California Clean Money Campaign and the other reform groups very strongly urge you to support this. We need to do something about our very low turnout and low voter involvement, and these three would be very small and reasonable steps in that direction. Thank you.
Mr. Weezer?
Thank you. If I could ask the CLA on the vote by mail, single district special elections, that is the direction that we're hoping to get some language on vote by mail. The city clerk does state that they don't have the resources to do it citywide at this time, and that at the next special election, not only be financially feasible, but we could also learn from it and use it as a so-called pilot. And as you mentioned, there'll be no adverse effect on the general fund, considering that there'll be the number of polling places will be reduced, but there still will be voting places. Secondly, on the ranked choice voting, you stated the cost, which would be about $40 million, and we understand that the county is already moving in that direction, so there probably will be no cost. There is about a 1% to 2% additional cost should they make it able to be compatible with ranked choice voting. The question is there, who would pay for that additional cost? And what's 1% or 2% of 40 million? I don't know. How much is that?
I guess it's around 500,000, I think.
500,000 or so?
But again, that's, if the county does go that way, then certainly we can try and work with them. If they don't, and there is a charter amendment, then the city would be obligated to purchase a full new voting system. So hopefully we could work something out with the county.
But we could word it in such a way that we say, when deemed possible, when the system is ready at the county, we could have some MOU or something with the county to say we're going to be using their system. But those $500,000, I think, will be negligible, considering that we will have less elections. So in your analysis, you didn't state the savings associating with having less elections. That's the whole purpose of ranked choice voting, is that we wouldn't have runoff elections. And how much does each election cost us, more or less?
I defer to the city clerk on that.
Holly Walcott with the Office of the City Clerk. For the 2011 elections, we budgeted $15.9 million to run them both the nominating and the runoff. So it doesn't split directly down the middle. We can only ballpark that it's a 60-40 split.
Yeah.
So you would be saving money in the out years. It would probably take, and again, I'm ballparking it, but we're estimating it would take 2 election cycles before we would start receiving money because of the outreach efforts. The ranked choice voting working group did not ever release the financial There was supposed to be I'm sorry, I'm sick, but there was supposed to be a financial analysis of ranked choice voting. That component was to be handled by the CAO, and they have yet to complete the report.
I have yet to complete it, because the $40 million, the county could cover that. If we say, and from what we hear,
That's
but
probably not how it would work, but yeah.
but it wouldn't be our $40 million, right?
We would, if we are going to work with them to purchase or to build a system, we would likely prorate the cost, or, the $40 million is definitely a ballpark figure based on the RFP we did last year. We don't really have any more narrowed down. So we're looking at sharing costs with them.
But either way, that has to be done either way, right? That's going to be done.
That has to be either
irrespective
way.
of whether we do ranked choice voting. So if we add a ranked choice voting component, we could say it's about $500,000 estimation. And given the fact that, we anticipate we're going to have some savings from less elections because there will be no runoffs, we could say that's negligible. I mean, we round off and say we want to get some of that money as well to education, possibly more public financing of campaigns. So we shift that money around. That's the financial analysis on that. And finally, on the cap, if we lift the cap, the idea of doing that is if we're going to commit ourselves to having more fully publicly financed campaigns, this is a first step in moving in that direction. We will obviously need more funding for publicly financing of campaigns, and it's my sense that our current formulas for our matching funds, what we currently call public financing of campaigns, is just not working as anticipated. And so we changed the formula. We allow for more incentives to people to participate in publicly financed campaigns. I think we'll, at some point in the future, need more funding for that. So I understand the financial situation the city is in, so perhaps we don't have to do it for these upcoming elections. But if you look at the elections that are coming up in the mayor's election, which is 2013, do you anticipate we will use up all the $12 million for that, or any estimations from previous? Okay.
Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission. Based on the 2001 election and the fact that there were a number of open seats and it was a citywide race, we estimate that the 2013 election will require $6 to $7 million from the matching funds program. After that, the 2015 election will also have a number of open seats, and we estimate an additional $3 to $4 million for that race.
Okay, so that's at the high end. How much is that?
$11 million.
$11 million. And so we're anticipating that even if we're going to have that funding available for those races, but to move to a different financing scheme, we may have to lift the cap. And so we don't have an election coming up where we can do this in 11, so we're just planning ahead with this. And so recognizing that this may require more funding in the future, we're planning ahead should we move in that direction to have more fully publicly financed campaigns. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like we're missing a lot of the potential calculations on the money saved, and if you look at the vote by mail, it doesn't look like we calculated the cost of interaction with every polling place location, the cost of paying people at all those hundreds of polling place locations.
That's in the city clerk's report.
And so what was that number?
Well, we gave a different, we based it on, again, we're talking about a single district election. So we based it on the Council District 2 costs, and it was estimated we'd save about $570,000 on a single district runoff. Now, that's if you reduce the number of polling places. Subsequently, Rules asked us to report back on maintaining what would be the break-even point, and the break-even point would be having 67 neighborhood voting centers. So it depends on the number of voting centers that you have available in the single district election.
So what about citywide?
We can't do it citywide.
And why is that?
Because right now, we have our voting system. I mean, there's a number of reasons, but the primary reason is the voting system we have right now, and you know, the ballots are those cards, the Inca vote cards. We have in excess of 500 different ballot types. So you would have to be able to have each one of those ballot types available at every neighborhood voting center throughout the city. And we don't have the ability to produce a ballot on demand for anybody who would show up at a neighborhood voting center that day. We can only do one ballot type. So we can only do it in a single district election right now.
So,
It would cost us a ridiculous amount of money to do it.
so we're
And we don't
saying
have the
that
ability to do it anyway.
if you had that number of voting sites, you'd be able to walk in from anywhere in the city. You couldn't limit it to just those in that neighborhood or in that council district.
And you would also be talking about provisional voting too, because at the neighborhood voting centers, when you walk in, there wouldn't be a roster, or there would be the roster of only those who have not received a vote by mail ballot. So if you would receive the vote by mail ballot, you would have a choice of, if you walked in, if you had the ballot with you and had it filled out, you could drop it off at the neighborhood voting center, or you could fill it out at the neighborhood voting center. But if you don't have a ballot on you, you're going to have to vote provisionally.
And the idea of having every ballot throughout the entire city, is that to ease the ability to vote? If you work downtown, you can go to a downtown center?
If you walked into if you walked into my polling center, how would I know if I sent out all vote by mail ballots?
I don't know how it's set up, but one would assume if we had the right system that we'd be able to track every voter in the city.
Right, and then send them, if you walked into my voting center and I'd say, okay, no, you can't vote here, you have to go across town and vote over there. It would cause a great deal of frustration for the voters.
So you just do a provisional ballot?
You would be doing a provisional ballot anyway, but we'd have to have all the different ballot types ready to go for whoever walked in.
And you don't have the ability?
We do not have the ability to do that citywide.
What would the possibility be of largely eliminating that piece of it and making it a mostly vote-by-mail election?
That is a policy decision.
Are those done, in other cities, do they have purely vote-by-mail elections, or do they all have
We have
multiple voting
certain districts that are all vote by mail. If there aren't, depending on the number of voters, we have designated vote by mails. But we have stated in many of our reports, and I can pull specific portions for you, and I'll get them to your office, of all our reports that we've reported on vote by mail. But there's been a large population that has largely opposed all vote by mail. There are people who still like to go to the polls. There's people who see it as their right to go to the polls.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But we've already turned down two of these proposals once before because they weren't financially feasible. Technically, they couldn't be done. Other cities have tried some of the things, went backwards and stopped doing them. And I think we should just do it again.
Let me just ask CLA, CAO, that the Rules Committee, from looking at their report, moved just one of these three items with no recommendation.
There were three items on the rules agenda that related to electoral reform. This item encompassed all three. They moved this forward with no recommendation.
But did they cover the rank?
Yes, they addressed all three of these proposals and moved all of them without any recommendation.
From looking at their report, it looks like they only addressed matching funds.
I know that we did take them all up, and at the end, they said that they wanted to move the CLA report without recommendation to move it out of committee. But I haven't seen the committee clerk's report, so I would have to.
Okay. So, I mean, the draft, I mean, that's what I'm confused at, because it's actually the heading basically relative to removing the cap on the maximum allowable amount of the matching funds, and then it goes submit recommendations. It doesn't comment on any of the other two. I'm just, If it's your perception they moved them all?
Yes, I believe that they moved, there were 3 different items. One was specific to vote by mail, one was specific to ranked choice.
Separate items, or did they come in a report?
And then there was one item which covered all 3. And when I was there, I believe that they did move the last item which covered all 3 forward.
There were 3 separate council files.
That was our understanding from what rules did. I'm not sure of the write-up on the rules action, but it was our understanding that they had moved all 3 without a recommendation.
All 3, okay. So this report may not, or did they write 3 separate reports?
No, this report addressed all 3.
No. CLA report does, but the committee report, did they write 3 separate reports?
You know, I think we'll have to follow with the clerk to make sure we get that clarified as it moves forward.
The committee report I have only reflects the cap. It doesn't comment on any of
That's creating some confusion because it only addresses that, but I believe all 3 were moved without the recommendation, so. Yeah, if you want to hold this, we can see if we can follow up.
All right, why don't we hold that and go to the next item then? Is it my understanding it has to go through Rules Committee in order to be recommended for the charter?
It already has gone through Rules Committee, so.
That's a requirement. It's got to go through Rules.
I believe so.
Okay, all right.
And I think that the difference here is that, from where my staff tells me that the Rules Committee viewed the ranked choice voting and the vote by mail not having a negative financial implication, but they want to discuss what the impacts may be with the matching funds, and that's what's written on the report. That's our understanding.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we, while we get it done, we'll go to the next item.
You want to go to item 7? Okay. Item 7 is CEO and City Attorney Report in response to motion Han Corian relative to replacing a ballot measure to implement an oil extraction fee on all barrels of crude oil that are extracted within the city on the March 2011 municipal election. This was also referred to the Rules and Elections Committee.
Who's going to kick it off?
Hi, Brooks Brent, the CEO. I guess I could talk about the revenue aspect of the proposal. Basically, you're looking at kind of like 3 different ways to do this. The most common one that's used by most of the cities in the Southern California region, which is about close to a dozen, which is like a fixed price per barrel, ranges anywhere from 20 cents up to about 65 cents per barrel on the tax. Probably the number one in the region would be Long Beach. They get around 16 million barrels. They recently, back in May of 2007, raised it from 15 cents per barrel up to 40 cents per barrel. If you go this route, in terms of putting it on the ballot, also you should put like a CPI adjustment built into it so that you can increase it over time, otherwise you'll get stuck. Another method, which is kind of like what Culver City does, which is a percentage of the price per barrel, and which I think is around $80 per barrel right now, so they're 1.8%. If you adopted the same thing here, giving our production being around 1 million barrels, is just a guess, and on the low side, but you're looking at about 1.4.
You're estimating one.
I'm saying 1 million barrels because I don't have a real good estimate of what's produced in the region, but we don't have the Wilmington oil field within our city limits.
Are you saying specifically in the city of L.A.?
Within the city of Los Angeles, yes, within our boundaries.
So we do not know what that number is.
No, but figure, 1 million barrels on the conservative side, probably 3 million to 4 million at the top end. It also depends if the price of barrel oil goes up, maybe more people will suddenly go back and look at previous kind of like abandoned or dormant oil fields, oil wells to maybe extract more out of there. It depends. Anyway, so you can do like Culver City and do 1.8%, like 1.8% per barrel, which works at about $1.44 per barrel right now, compared to the other 20 to 65 cents per barrel at the fixed rate. Another thing is, right now we do, in a sense, collect an oil and extraction tax. We could do it through the business tax. It's through wholesale sales, and it works out to be about, if I'm guessing it right, about 8 cents per barrel right now, because it's $1 per $1,000 of sales. And so that works, so if you figure if we do 1 million barrels right now, that's $80,000 that we're collecting already. Now, you could be the same way that I guess you're looking at the billboards, where you could then create a special rate for oil extraction within the city and the business tax, and then set it whatever rate you'd like.
So you would, if you did it through business tax, you wouldn't have to go to the...
No, you have to go to the voter in all cases, because you're raising the tax. So it's, by Prop 218, you have to go to the vote of the people. And again, the whole regular general fund, either, need the 50+1, or if you go a special funded tax, where you'll need a supermajority of 2/3, which is what Long Beach did. They put it all to, like police and fire, and they still got 70% of the vote approving it. Anyways, those are 3 methods, so.
Let me just ask, this motion today is very similar to the one that was done in '08, and at that time, they asked the CAO for a report on outlining the steps to put it on the charter. Has that report ever been done?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Could you check on that, because that's, the motion is almost identical, but they asked, it's under 08-0411.
No, just to clarify, no, we have not put together a report. Now, this item has come up, I believe, twice to council as part of the Revenue Day. I believe actually a report was, or a matrix, I should say, was put together by the CLA, and back in February 2010, and this was one of the items on there, and it was discussed during that council meeting. I don't believe there's any direction given. We can put together a quick report. It's really boils down to a policy decision. It doesn't appear to be a large revenue generator type back tax, however which way we go. And so we would look for some direction.
Basically, if you adopted the Culver City method, for every 1 million barrels you extract, you get about $1.4 million in revenue.
For every 1 million barrels?
Yeah, at $80 per barrel. If it goes up from there, then you'll make more, but...
Is that why, when we dealt with that Revenue Day, that wasn't given a lot of consideration? Because
that is correct, that this was not viewed as having a high dollar value. I think based on the estimates, the range was anywhere, from $1.5 to $2 million per year, depending on the method and where the price of oil goes.
But do we have a process to understand how many barrels are actually extracted? I mean, there's no place to go to and make that assessment?
I believe we have as source, I do recall at some point, I don't recall the individual where we got some estimates, but the actual number of barrels, I think at one time was slightly over 2 million barrels.
I mean, we've had a lot of oil fields in Los Angeles over the years, but we've also pumped out a good chunk of it that was within city limits, so.
We did look at this. We've been looking at this for the last several months, and Ray is correct. It originally showed up in 2008, and then it appeared in a matrix that was presented back in February or March during Revenue Day. There was some general instructions to continue to look at it, but in our analysis of it, it did appear that with regard to the amount of revenue generated, that this did not seem like it would generate a significant amount, maybe 2 million, around a couple million, and 4 million at best, depending upon where you taxed the barrel tax amount. There's also some consideration that should be given to the fact that, in the last few weeks, we've been looking at a whole bunch of charter reform measures, and there is some concern that, number one, too many, there will be additional costs to put on the ballot. And then there is also the issue of voter fatigue with regard to so many measures that are going to be appearing on this ballot. We've already asked the city attorney to draft a number of measures already. So there needs to be some consideration at what point are we going to say, okay, we've reached the maximum number. So there are already, if I recall correctly, there's probably at least 5 or 6 that we've already asked them to draft. Today, we've already asked for 3 more. There is also the Reserve Fund and Budget Stabilization Fund. There's going to be the DWP reform measures, which is another report. There's a marijuana tax report that's also being in the process of being released. So there are a number of measures that have been sought. So, yeah, there's a number of them.
Yeah. But, I mean, is that moving? Because I thought the city attorney said that's not legal.
There is a report, and I believe if Charles is still here, he could probably speak to it, but we just did release another report. There were two potential areas. There was one issue, thank you, Charles. There was one issue that related to taxing medicinal marijuana, and there was also the issue if the state proposition passed that there was another separate tax associated with that.
Certainly, just could you repeat the question very briefly?
Well, the thing is, on the issue of the marijuana, I thought that the city attorney said that was illegal. That's why we didn't agendize it in this committee.
Right. There's two proposed taxes, both of which we have addressed in one report. One would be on medical marijuana dispensaries. They'd have to pay a certain business tax for that. That's the proposal. The other proposal is that if Proposition 19 passes, then the city would go forward with placing on the March ballot a tax on recreational marijuana.
It's a moot point. The federal government says it's illegal no matter what you pass.
I'm sorry, city attorney?
You want me to say whether it's illegal for us to tax
Well, no,
it?
I think we got your opinion. I mean, the city attorney's opinion, what I read anyway a while back.
Well, it's something we're reviewing right now, I believe, and if Proposition 19 passes, it's possible we could tax it as a municipal matter, regardless of what federal law will say on the issue.
There's actually a number of jurisdictions within the state of California that have done just that.
Yeah, but I think we had an article the other day from Oakland that passed the tax contrary to their city attorney's opinion that it was illegal.
I don't think that's on the agenda.
Come on, Zuma. Come on, give us a break. Zuma, come on, Zuma. Okay. Okay. On item 7, before we go any further, let me just ask, we got a couple of people that came up for comments, and then we'll get back to it. Dr. Williams and also Mike. Item 7. Okay.
Thank you. Maya Zettler on behalf of VICA, Valley Industry and Commerce Association. We are here today to oppose the proposal to place the measure on the March 2011 municipal ballot to implement an oil extraction fee within the city of Los Angeles, and we're asking for your vote to oppose this as well. We are opposed to this fee because we oppose taxing one specific industry. In addition, we are opposed because we feel that in this economic climate, it is not the right time nor the right thing to do to raise taxes or fees on business. We should instead be focusing on finding ways to support business and improve the business climate within the city of Los Angeles instead of taxing them. We hope today that you will vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Oh, you have anything?
Yeah, I would certainly argue in favor of this as probably the most harmless tax that one can possibly put on business. I believe every other oil-producing state taxes oil in a way that California doesn't. It's not a business that will run away and go to another place. It's already, right now it's as favorable as it could be, but otherwise we wind up at about the same rate as everybody else. And the oil's here. So you're not going to lose any jobs, you're not going to lose any business. It's really a no-lose situation, except we get some revenue. And it doesn't impact the overall price of oil, although I'm sure if there's ads against it, that'll be claimed. This is an absolute drop in the bucket. It's not going to impact the oil companies. It'll just produce some revenue for us. So I would tax them at the highest rate that's comparable and bring in a few $1 million to the city. It's not like we have no need for it. I know we're putting a lot of things on the ballot, and when we look at all our choices, I would encourage us to look at the ones that bring in the most revenue and focus on those. And maybe we don't go forward with every single idea that we've ever had and put 15 things on the ballot. we put the things on that'll actually bring in revenue, and certainly as harmlessly as this one could, I think this is a great choice.
Well, conceptually, this sounds good. I need to see a report to better understand the numbers, et cetera. But I think it would be irresponsible of us to put something on the ballot without fully knowing the true impact. So I'm sure the report will come out with some good numbers of what we could realize in revenue, but we need to see those reports.
Let me ask if we could do this because of the time constraints of November. If we can ask the CAO to work with the city clerk and put those kinds of numbers in the committee report, we could send this forward without a recommendation, but we'll have the material once it gets to council. But we need that kind of expectation of number of barrels, what percentage, the different scenarios talked about, and give an idea of what the cost retrieval would be for the city.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll put together a little matrix for the clerk with the two methods.
The committee report, we'll send it forward and have the information when it comes to council. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll go back to 7.
Number 6.
6?
Yeah.
And then after 6, we'll take 13 out of order. Karen, why don't you explain to us what the Rules Committee did? So,
in rules, there were actually 3 different council files on this item, and so all 3 of them were moved without recommendation, but there are different council files. The one that's before you today is our CLA report, and that addresses all 3. So technically what's before you are all 3, but what Rules did was send the matching funds item here.
and they used the same CLA report, even though they were separate.
Right, one CLA report was written on all 3 options.
Okay, thank you. All right, colleagues, on item 6, we have before us 3 items. As far as my personal vote, I'm going to oppose all 3 of them. So, Paul, do you want to vote on them as a lump or individually?
The pleasure of the rest of my colleagues.
So, I mean, as a lump, I think, unless anybody has a yes on some and no on none, let's vote them all together.
Okay, let's vote it together. Paul?
But before we vote, can I ask, as a recommendation, that the CAO write a report on these items before they get to council? Seems to me like some of the savings under RCV weren't included in the analysis. And there might be some other clarifications that have to do with the $40 million, and actually that we are moving in that direction anyway, with the county taking a majority of that funding. So just a simple call to the county could get that information. So the CAO could do a report on these before we get to council as well.
And let me just, the one thing I'd like to see if we could also do is not germane to each one of these recommendations. The one item that's been discussed a number of times is whether, although each council has $500,000 max, I believe the citywide elections are $1 million, of whether there should be consideration for citywide elections that cap be moved up.
We can certainly look into that.
So that, not the council, but citywide.
So I have a question in terms of how we make this motion.
Do you have the eraser? Yeah.
Do we discuss this in light of what the county is likely to be doing, or do we just pass it as is? Because I think there's consensus that we'd want to wait until we piggyback on the county's activities.
Well, I see that we move it to council, and between now and then, we could get that information.
So work out the details between now and when it comes to council.
And I think one of the things is probably in the final vote is going to a great measure, be whether you can afford it, and if the county's actually going to get there. And I think to go to a charter without that knowledge, I think will weigh heavily on how people vote in the final analysis.
I presume we'd want to have that information by then.
Yeah, but I think that's what we're asking, that we'll move it and ask the CAO to come up with some financial analysis that Mr. Weezer asked for. I asked for additional issue that we can all bring that forward and look at it at the council. So we'll replicate what the Rules Committee did and move it without recommendation, and then we will ask for those additional bits of information when it gets to council.
I think this item is scheduled for Wednesday, if I understand it. I will say it will be very, very difficult for us to put some really good cost or savings figures together because there's so many unknowns.
But I think if that's the case, we can ask to continue it because we have till November 3rd.
No.
No?
I wouldn't want to continue it. Let's
No,
move it.
not here.
Oh.
At council.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
said it's coming to council Wednesday.
Yeah.
We can ask to give more time because we have until November 3rd.
We will attempt to get the information together, but
But if we don't get
even through November 3rd, we're not going to have all of the answers for us to provide a good assessment of what those costs or savings will be.
The best you can do.
I believe it might be considered in the Rules Committee on Wednesday, and then possibly consideration on Friday.
This item was considered in the Rules Committee last Wednesday, so this is the last stop before council.
Yeah. The thing is, if it gets on council for Wednesday, if all the material isn't available, we can continue it in council,
Yeah.
knowing that we have November 3rd as the drop dead date.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move it with no recommendation. So we can move to item 13.
Item 13, the CAO report relative to requests from the Department of Building Safety to approve proposed fees and additional staffing of 19 new resolution position authorities for the creation of a green building division within the department and related actions. The Personnel Committee approved the CAO recommendations on October 20th.
Let me just have one seat open. We have two public comments. Tracy from Central City and Maya from Micah.
Good afternoon. Tracy Shavira, Central City Association. CCA supports the department in their effort to create a green building division. And we understand that this is a mandate from the state. This is going to require expertise. So we feel that this is important to implement this program. We've actually worked with the Department of Building and Safety on the Restaurant and Hospitality Express program. That's proven to be very successful, basically streamlining the process for new restaurants, bars, and even grocery stores to open. And we see the Department of Building and Safety as problem solvers. They rolled up their sleeves energetically, got in the trenches and made effective changes. So we feel that if this new program, this new division, the Green Building Division, is run anything like the Restaurant and Hospitality Express program, we're going to see good programs or good developments moving through the process, creating jobs, and hopefully leading us to economic recovery. So we definitely support the Green Building Division, and we also support the addition of 19 personnel positions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Maya Zettler again on behalf of VICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. We are here to strongly support the Green Building Ordinance as well as the request for approved fees and an additional 19 new positions in the Department of Building and Safety to create this new Green Building Division. Given that it is mandatory from the state to enforce these new standards, we feel that it is crucial to have 19 new positions who will specialize in this field and have the appropriate level of training in order to properly implement the code and the new ordinance that will be implemented beginning January 1st, 2011. We feel that this will help the vitality of the Los Angeles region, and we support this measure and hope that you will as well. Thank you.
Greg, you going to lead that?
Good afternoon, Melissa Fleming with the CAO. The item for you is a CAO report relative to a request from the Department of Building and Safety for staffing and associated fees for the proposed Los Angeles Green Building Code. In July of this year, the state of California adopted the state's first Green Building Standards Code, referred to as Cal Green. The city, through its enforcement agent, Building and Safety, will be required to enforce the state's Cal Green Code upon its effective date on January 1st, 2011. In accordance with the previous council direction, the department has provided a draft ordinance that expands the scope of and provides local amendments to the Cal Green Code for adoption by the city. This new municipal code section is being referred to as the Los Angeles Green Building Code. The department has estimated that 38% of all plans checked and 20% of all permits issued will require adherence to the proposed Green Code.
Could you give those numbers again?
38% of all plans checked and 20% of all permits issued will require adherence to the proposed Green Code. As with any new building code, the department's workload will increase due to the mandate to enforce the requirements of the new Green Code. Building and Safety has completed a time study to estimate the additional workload requirements required for the enforcement of the provisions of the Green Code, and in accordance with that time study, the department has requested 19 new resolution authority positions to provide plan, check, and inspection services associated with the new code. In order to fully recover costs associated with these 19 staff members, they've also proposed a fee equivalent to 10% of their existing plan, check, and permit fees. As the proposed fee revenue will be deposited to the Building and Safety Building Permit Enterprise Fund, and the requested staffing will be funded by the Enterprise Fund, there's no impact to the general fund. And I'm joined at the table by representatives of the Department of Building and Safety, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Anything?
I just had a couple questions. You want to hire 19 people, you're going to be able to do that by January 1st? I mean, is there an existing list to hire from?
We could certainly try it. Ray Chan, Building and Safety, because the 8 engineering positions, we would like to do lateral transfer. Hopefully that, we could take some people from other department or from some of the people whom we lost to other departments that they may want to come back to work for the department. And for another 10 inspectors, we believe that we have to go through the layoff reserve list because we did lay off about 30 employees so far. So hopefully, if everything works out, we will be able to bring them aboard sometime in December.
Okay. And you've got already existing 22 reso positions that are unfilled in your budget now. Were they not being filled because of managed hiring, or?
Those 22 positions, they are unfunded positions. Only the purpose that we get those positions during the last budget cycle is only for the 90-day contract employees in case if our business increased, that we could hire some retirees back to help out.
Okay. Could you?
22.
That's the 22.
Those 20, yes.
Can these 19 be trained then to do that work instead of those 22 if business increases? I mean,
are you saying that if we're going to use those 22 unfunded authority resolutions to fill those positions, to do the work, instead of having new positions?
Instead of adding 19 more.
I think I just had a brief conversation with the CEO. I believe that out of the 19 positions, maybe 10 of the 19 positions would have the same classifications as, those 22 positions. They still would have 9 positions that would not be the equal classifications.
And that's correct. So it's 22 unfunded resolution authority positions. The department also has 8 unfunded regular authority positions for a total of 30. Of those 30, there are 10 of the 19 positions the department is requesting that are of either the same classification or equivalent classifications where an in lieu would be appropriate for that. So there is the potential that 10 of those positions could be utilized for this purpose.
Okay. And then the last question I had is dealing with the 3 supervisors. Is 3 for 19 the same ratio that you have for other inspector categories as far as supervision?
Actually, we really have 2 supervisors.
2?
Well, yeah, because first of all, if you look at, we will have people in the Van Nuys office, we will have people in the West Area office, and we have people in the Metro office. And there will be 2 supervisors supervising this group of other 17 people. The real manager in charge of the entire program has to do a lot of different functions because this is such a new program. I'm going to ask our Bureau Chief of Engineering Bureau to talk about the functions of this new, managers. So go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Ifa Kashafi, Chief of Engineering Bureau. In addition to normal responsibility of the Chief of Division in this position, the person will be in charge of the policy setting and code involvement and technology and outreach for the department through state level, and other department will resolve the issue related to the green products and do troubleshooting, will help the state and other cities in their code development and green development, facilitate green construction and technologies through the city. So it needs expertise and the knowledge to reach out in that level.
So for the enterprise zone, you would be even in the enterprise zone, the enterprise fund. Enterprise fund. You break even in the enterprise fund?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I don't really have anything to add in terms of questions. My only comment would be, I've gotten letters and a certain amount of lobbying saying that we're creating a new unnecessary level of staff and bureaucracy, and that we increased the cost of plan checks already. So, this is too harsh on business. So with those arguments, I would have expected that FICA and CCA and BOMA would all be beating down our doors asking us to halt this, and instead they're the ones that are encouraging us to go forward. So I would have to take that as a sign that the business community expects that this would be helpful, and if it's helpful to the business community and helpful for us to move forward with our green standards, it looks like pretty much of a win-win to me, and I think we should go ahead with it.
Now.
Yes, sir.
The thing is, we talked a little bit about this in personnel.
Yes.
And again, I still have the same concerns of creating a specialized unit, particularly when it appears that it's going to not only take on the responsibility of the training, becoming the experts, but also processing 38% or so of the workload and also 20% of the permits. And my fear is, although the business community is here today, they'll be the first ones here when you give them that sad story that says, I can't get your work done. And so my concern is how quickly do we get the massive number of inspectors that are working the general workload up to speed so that we're not dealing with this specialized unit as the only resource to address this new legislation.
Right. To answer your question, we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Now, let me just step back and explain a little bit more. First of all, the reason we need that 19 new positions is not really just because we need a division to implement this specialized program. It's number one is because of the workload. We have lost a total of about 240 plus employees for the last 18 months. And because of that, and luckily, that business is kind of turning around. For the last quarter this year, for the last quarter, first quarter of this fiscal year compared to last year at the same time, we see an increase in business activity of about 15% in construction. Our revenue increased about 30%, and part of the reason that our revenue increased more than the business volume is because there was a fee increase involved that was passed by council as of October of last year. But with that said, we are really falling behind in many of our response to customers. So we know that there's no way with existing staff that we can handle this new program, the workload. Now, the reason that we have this division is because, number one, time is of an essence. There's no way that we could train all the plan check engineers and inspectors this new program, because this new program is not 100% mature. There's still a lot of conflicts. There might be some interpretational conflicts also, and also some implementation that we are not 100% certain yet, just like any new code. As I showed in the personnel committee, this is not like a couple of chapters of code information. It is a whole code book by itself is about that thick. So we need a special team to digest it, to implement it, to make sure there's consistency in our interpretation and implementation. I would think that within about 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to establish policies, protocols, and consistency so that we could train our other staff to implement the program. We certainly understand that it is not a good way to do business if people have to go through 2 different plan check engineers or 2 different inspectors, to get a job done. But this is just a temporary measure, and we would come back in 6 months to give you an update, and another 6 months from there on until we scale down this unit dramatically.
And if I may add, Councilman, I mean, your comments are well taken, and I think we need to explain a little bit how we get more and more people trained, and we do that with other programs too. I'm sorry, my name is Osama Union with the City of Los Angeles, with Building and Safety. We will introduce green building training throughout our training program, which we do on a weekly basis. Of course, for the 19, we'd have to go into full-time training, but for the rest of the staff, we would do a green building training. Also, we do rotations through these specialized units to make sure that people, once they learn it, they rotate out, new people come in and develop that level of expertise. And through these 2 processes, we get more and more staff trained in that field. And periodically, we have to come back and look at it. Is it standardized enough? Have we figured it out enough to be able to hand it over? But we will definitely do that. We will do regular training to everybody and get rotations through the specialized unit.
Okay. Then the thing is, what I'd like you to emphasize on your 6 months reporting is just that, how quickly we're getting the larger group of inspectors ingrained into the new guidelines, because the guidelines aren't going to go away.
Right.
And so they're going to be with us, and so that we do not have longer than necessary 2 sets of inspectors.
Sure. Right.
And 2 sets of reviewers and all that other, because, again, that's what drives the business community and the general public a little batty, that they think they got it done, and all of a sudden you say, go and speak to somebody at the table next to them because they have a different set of guidelines. So I would really like to make sure you emphasize just how quickly we can assimilate this training into the larger mass of people.
Absolutely. And we are taking an additional step, and we're thinking in the enforcement of it today, how are we going to make sure that the public know that this is in their process, and we make it our responsibility to make sure they know about it. So,
So if you could do that during your 6-month report, we'd appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move that item with the recommendation. Thank you. You, sir. What do we have left?
We actually have number 9 that we'd certainly have to get approved, and that is the RCO report and resolution and city attorney report and ordinance relative to the issue of the $128 million in MICLA bonds.
What number is that?
That's number 9. It's the next item.
And 9 and 10 you can take together.
If you can go fast. Okay.
All right, Natalie, make it fast. Go.
Okay. On 9 and 10, the only thing I have a concern about is that on both reports, support them, but we'll give the authority on the funding for the fleet, but they have to come back to us before they buy the fleets. Because at the same time, we're talking about getting rid of 2,000 vehicles. Now, when I say fleet, I'm not talking about the helicopter. I'm talking about the fleet. So, but we can get the authority for for both 9 and 10. That's $42 million that's engulfed in fleet of some type, that we can get the authority approval. But before we buy the fleet, that you come back and explain to us where we are on general services reducing their overall car fleet. Okay? So that's my only concern.
Me too.
Is that clear? But the authority to go out for the MICLA.
Yeah, we'll put the money aside and they won't have access to it till they come back to you.
That's right. But because of the interest rate and the fact that
Correct.
the R and all that other stuff will go forward, but the vehicle purchase has to come back before you implement that piece?
Angela Sherrick with the Department of General Services. So just to clarify, when we talk about the reduction of the fleet, the 2,000 vehicles that we had talked about, we talked about hiring a consultant to help us actually identify the vehicles. So we already have our consultant on board. We already have a preliminary report from the consultant. Is that what you would actually like to see, the preliminary?
We'd like to see how many of those 2,000 vehicles are disappearing before we start buying new cars. And whether some of those cars that are going through surplus, they take the place of some of the vehicles that we're talking about buying. So the key is I don't want to be buying vehicles and cutting 2,000 and they're passing in the doorway. We want to clear the fleet out, save the money on gas and all the things that was going to do. And as we rebuild the fleet, we want to do it with some idea that we are being responsible in that regard.
I would, if I may, if I can make a pitch, part of the proposal from GST is to buy, I believe, some street sweepers, and the contract is going to expire in December.
Those are not what I consider part of the fleet. I'm talking about.
Okay.
But as far as what...
Sedans and cars.
But as far as what's being requested today is basically the heavy-duty vehicles.
Those are not what I'm talking about.
Can we split that and go ahead and give them the authority to go forward on those two, on the helicopter?
And street sweepers and things like that.
Councilmember, actually, what the proposal before you today is actually for 48 pieces of equipment that are not sedans, they are not pickups, they're heavy-duty pieces of equipment and construction equipment. So we're talking about sweepers, aerial trucks, dump trucks, construction-type equipment. So none of those pieces of equipment that you just identified, sedans, pickups.
We're replacing existing vehicles.
We're replacing existing vehicles, but they are construction equipment and sweepers, so they're not the sedans that you're concerned about.
All right. Those kinds of vehicles on construction, helicopters, things like that.
That is correct. We would not have recommended any sedans or anything like that. This is basically heavy-duty equipment.
That's what I'm
for,
talking about.
yeah.
These have a useful life of up to 11 years, so you're talking about,
And you're going to fix.
I call them the Tonka toys, huh?
And then you're going to fix the debt service to match the life
Correct.
of the vehicle.
Yes.
Right.
And
And
the
it's
last piece is, basically, these are also for CARB resolution, to basically phase out that older equipment, these new equipment, better emissions, et cetera, et cetera.
And my only other question, you're removing X number of dollars from the short-term debt?
Correct.
All right. What I didn't see in the report is where are we on the long-term debt is the dollar value?
Dollar value of long-term debt altogether, of the amount we've issued or the amount we're paying in
Are
debt
we
service?
within our 6% or whatever?
Oh, there's attached, we're at 5.22%.
Okay, so we're just under
Yes.
our 6%.
Mhm.
We're moving it from short-term to long-term, but we're still under our percentage.
Yes.
Okay. But again, fleet, I'm talking about sedans, cars, things like that.
Right, there's no, like I said, there's no cars, it's all truck, long-term vehicles. That's why we recommended it for ARA, because they were this heavy-duty equipment,
And if you
and we
match-
get that 45% back.
That's the debt service with the useful life?
Yes, we did.
All right. All right. And you can keep the helicopter.
But while we brought it up, we've been asking for that phase report on the sedan vehicle fleet since May.
Yes, that's...
And we've been asking for the Mikla report since January.
We gave you a McClure report, you want another
Not
McClure
the one we
report?
were looking for.
We haven't exceeded 200 million
I
yet,
know,
but we'll
but
see what we can do.
But we didn't say, bring it to us the day you exceed 200 million. We said, bring us the Mikla report so that we can see where we are and what's in it.
Okay.
And what the guidelines are.
We'll be happy.
Fine.
As we come forward with the letter of credit, I mean, some of that comes forward, but we'll have some policy issues to discuss.
We can move item
9 and 10, perfect.
As we discussed. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
And we'll continue item 11 and 12?
Continue, because we're losing a call. Yes.
Okay.
You know, you lost the form, you lost the whole committee. You were.
Yes, because we got to deal with 12.
12. We were waiting for 12.
No, we're going to wait, we're going to do 12 next week, 11 and 12.
Your personnel will just have to wait another week.
That's good. We're adjourned? That's pretty good.